The pristine white marble floors of my parents' Tribeca penthouse reflected the Manhattan skyline as I sat cross-legged in the corner of their minimalist living room, sketching designs for what would eventually become the most coveted handbag collection of the season. My iPad Pro rested against my knees while I used my Apple Pencil to refine the curves of a shoulder bag that would retail for $4,200 and have a 6-month waiting list. Valentina, put that tablet away. My sister Isabella commanded from her position on the stark white sectional, where she'd been holding court about her latest achievements in environmental law. We're having a serious family discussion about sustainable careers, not watching you doodle purses like some kind of fashion-obsessed teenager. My older brother Marco nodded approvingly from behind the kitchen island, where he'd been preparing his signature espresso with the same precision he applied to his neurosurgery practice. Bella's right. You're 27 years old, Val. Time to consider something more substantial than drawing clothes that nobody needs. Clothes design is pointless, Isabella declared with the righteous conviction of someone who'd just won a landmark environmental case. The fashion industry is destroying the planet with fast fashion and conspicuous consumption. You're wasting your talent on frivolous luxury items when you could be contributing to society in meaningful ways. The familiar weight of their collective disapproval settled over the penthouse like expensive perfume, heavy and suffocating. This intervention had been building throughout our Sunday family brunch. Their growing concern about my lack of serious direction, their increasingly pointed suggestions that I consider socially responsible career alternatives, their barely concealed embarrassment when colleagues asked what their youngest daughter did for work. Valentina. Dad continued from his position at the floor-to-ceiling windows, where he'd been reviewing medical journals despite supposedly being retired from his cardiothoracic surgery practice. Your mother and I have been patient with these artistic hobbies, but it's time to face reality. Isabella is fighting climate change through environmental law, Marco is saving lives in the operating room, and you're, what? Sketching accessories that cost more than most people's rent. I don't sketch accessories, I replied softly, not looking up from my screen where I was refining the hardware details on a clutch design. I develop comprehensive fashion collections across multiple product categories. That makes it even worse, Mom interjected from her position at the dining table, where she'd been organizing her charity foundation documents. As former CEO of a major pharmaceutical company, she understood the importance of contributing to society's well-being. At least if you were designing affordable clothing for everyday people, there might be some social value. But luxury fashion? It's pure vanity. The accusation hung in the pristine air like the scent from her Hermes candles. I could feel their collective gaze boring into me, waiting for the admission they expected, that my fashion designs were indeed frivolous, that I was contributing nothing meaningful to the world, that I was ready to accept their generous offers to help me find purposeful work in their respective fields. Consider your options, Isabella pressed, her environmental law expertise lending authority to her voice. I could introduce you to people at the Natural Resources Defense Council. Marco knows administrators at Doctors Without Borders who need communications coordinators. Even Dad still has connections in medical research who could use someone with your artistic eye for data visualization. I might have responded, might have tried once again to explain that my work was more complex than they imagined, more impactful than they assumed, but my phone buzzed against the marble coffee table with an incoming call that made my pulse quicken. The caller ID displayed, Gucci Group, Board. But my family had no way of recognizing the significance of Kering's executive team calling my personal line. Excuse me, I said softly, sliding to answer while my family continued their intervention. Hello. Valentina, grazie a Dio we reached you. The voice belonged to Marco Bizzarri, CEO of Gucci, though my family would never recognize one of the most powerful voices in global luxury fashion. The board meeting just concluded in Milan. We need your immediate approval for the $2.8 billion fashion empire expansion. Your luxury conglomerate acquisition depends on your authorization. The penthouse had gone completely silent, my family's intervention grinding to a halt as they processed the words fashion empire and $2.8 billion. I maintained my composure, though my heart raced with the familiar thrill of closing another industry-reshaping deal. Which specific acquisitions? I asked, continuing to refine buckle details on my handbag design as if this were any ordinary business call. The European leather goods manufacturers or the Asian textile partnerships? Both. plus the American retail expansion and the emerging markets distribution networks. Your creative strategy division mapped out the entire global luxury consolidation, and we need your signature before the Paris Fashion Week announcements. His voice carried the urgency of someone managing billion-dollar time-sensitive deals. Valentina, this acquisition officially makes Celestial Fashion Holdings the largest independent luxury conglomerate in the world. Dad's medical journals lay forgotten on the window ledge. Isabella's environmental law briefs scattered across her lap as her hands went limp. Marco had frozen mid-pour, expensive espresso overflowing onto the white marble counter. And the collection integration timeline for the upcoming seasons? I continued as if discussing weekend plans rather than restructuring the entire luxury fashion industry. 6 months for full creative merger. Your existing portfolio, the design houses, the manufacturing facilities, the retail networks. Everything flows together seamlessly. The board estimates this brings your total luxury market control to approximately 74% of all globally distributed high-end fashion. I allowed myself the smallest smile, one that I made sure reached every corner of the now-silent penthouse. Approved unanimously, I said clearly, ensuring each word carried to my family's stunned faces. Authorize all acquisitions and proceed with the expansion. Perfetto. Oh, and Valentina. Congratulations on officially becoming the youngest person ever to control a luxury fashion empire worth $6.3 billion. Those pointless clothing designs are projected to generate $1.7 billion in revenue this quarter alone. I ended the call and placed my phone gently beside my iPad, where the handbag design would eventually become Vogue's accessory of the year. The silence stretched like expensive silk, broken only by the distant sound of Manhattan traffic 43 floors below. That was Marco Bizzarri from Gucci, I said conversationally, returning to my design work. Apparently, the board approved my $2.8 billion global luxury acquisition. It officially makes Celestial Fashion Holdings the largest independent luxury conglomerate worldwide. Mom's baccarat crystal water glass slipped from her nerveless fingers, shattering against the marble floor with a sound like breaking assumptions. Your fashion conglomerate? Isabella whispered, her environmental law expertise apparently failing her in the face of luxury industry realities. Fashion empire primarily. I own controlling interests in Gucci, Prada, Valentino, Bottega Veneta, and most of the major independent luxury houses globally. I continued sketching with practiced precision. Those pointless clothing designs you mentioned? Last quarter they generated approximately $520 million in global luxury retail revenue. The afternoon sun cast geometric shadows across the penthouse as my family processed this information with varying degrees of shock and disbelief. The minimalist Tribeca space suddenly seemed less impressive against the backdrop of a $6.3 billion fashion empire. But you live in that small studio in the village, Marco managed weakly. You take the subway everywhere. Tax efficiency and creative inspiration, I explained patiently. Also, the village location is actually a converted industrial complex that houses my main design studios, pattern-making facilities, and the headquarters for Celestial Fashion Holdings. I take the subway because it's faster than sitting in Manhattan traffic. Dad was staring at his medical research as if it had suddenly become irrelevant. Celestial Fashion Holdings, that's the company behind most of the luxury fashion you see in Bergdorf Goodman, yes. I smiled, continuing to work on my accessory hardware. The handbag I was designing when you interrupted? Gucci paid $34 million for exclusive global design rights before I even finished the prototype. The penthouse felt smaller now, the expensive minimalist furniture seeming less impressive against the backdrop of a multi-billion-dollar fashion empire. My successful family looked like visitors in their own intervention, uncertain and displaced by revelations that redefined everything they thought they knew about success and social impact. This has to be some kind of mistake, Isabella said, her voice rising with panic that seemed inappropriate for a successful environmental lawyer. Val, you can't just own Gucci. That's not how the fashion world works. You draw pictures on a tablet. I create intellectual property that gets developed into globally distributed luxury products, I corrected mildly. The drawings you dismissed as frivolous doodling? They're the foundation of a fashion empire that influences approximately 890 million consumers worldwide annually. Marco was pacing now, his surgical precision shoes clicking against the marble in an increasingly frantic rhythm. Wait. If you own controlling interests in these fashion houses, then you... His medical expertise was finally catching up with the implications. You decide what gets produced. You control global luxury fashion trends. I chair the Global Creative Committee actually. We evaluate approximately 25,000 design submissions annually and approve about 1,200 pieces for production across all our luxury brands. I captured his expression in a mental sketch. The moment when someone realizes they've been completely wrong about everything they thought they knew. Those pieces then generate revenue through retail sales, licensing deals, and brand partnerships that I also oversee. Mom had gone completely pale, her pharmaceutical CEO composure finally cracking. Valentina, honey, if this is true, if you really own all these fashion companies, why didn't you tell us? Why let us think you were wasting your time on trivial designs? The question hung in the penthouse air like expensive fabric softener, heavy and unavoidable. I looked at each of them in turn. My successful, accomplished family who had spent years trying to redirect my apparently meaningless life. Tell you what exactly? I asked quietly. That every time I tried to share something I was excited about, you called it fashion doodling? That when I mentioned working with major design houses, you assumed I meant applying for internships? That when I talked about my Milan meetings, you suggested I consider studying abroad instead of playing with clothes? But Valentina, Isabella interjected, her environmental law instincts finally kicking in, surely you could have been more explicit about the scope of your success. Like when? I challenged. Like 18 months ago when I mentioned the sustainability initiatives, and you told me to stop pretending luxury fashion could be environmentally responsible? Or last Christmas when I talked about my carbon-neutral manufacturing processes, and you all assumed I was taking online courses about eco-friendly design. Dad stopped reviewing his medical journals, his face flushing with embarrassment. You're telling me that when you said you were working on fashion projects, you meant you were running luxury conglomerates? I meant exactly what I said. You're the ones who decided it meant something smaller. I returned to my design, adding sustainable material specifications that would revolutionize luxury manufacturing. The same way you decided my tablet sketching was therapeutic hobby time instead of billion-dollar product development. Isabella's environmental law materials finally scattered completely as her hands shook. This is insane. Val, you're talking about billions of dollars. Billions. People don't just accidentally build fashion empires while their families aren't paying attention. They do when their families are too busy being disappointed to actually listen, I replied, crafting accessory details that would define next season's trends globally. You know what's particularly ironic? I actually tried to include you. 2 years ago, when Celestial Fashion Holdings launched our first major sustainability initiative, I invited you all to the environmental impact presentation. The memory hit Isabella visibly, her hand flying to cover her mouth. Oh God. We said we were busy with real environmental work. You had a crucial climate change hearing. Marco was attending medical conferences that actually saved lives. Dad was consulting on research that contributed to human knowledge. Each word landed like a perfectly placed stitch. So I presented alone. Just me and every major environmental organization leader, discussing how luxury fashion could become carbon neutral while maintaining profitability. No big deal. The penthouse felt suffocating now, the afternoon light casting harsh shadows across the minimalist furniture. My family looked like strangers in their own intervention, diminished by revelations that redefined their understanding of success and social contribution. Valentina, we didn't know, Dad said weakly, his medical expertise suddenly seeming limited. If you had just explained. Explained what? That my frivolous fashion designs were generating more positive environmental impact than most environmental law cases? That my pointless luxury items provide sustainable employment for over 40,000 people across 6 continents. I checked my custom Cartier watch, a prototype given exclusively to fashion industry leaders who control over $1 billion in annual sustainable production. I tried explaining. You weren't interested in hearing it. That watch. Isabella whispered, finally noticing the unique craftsmanship that marked it as something extraordinary. Limited prototype, I said. The Council for Sustainable Fashion gives it to designers who change luxury goods. Only 12 exist. I earned mine when Celestial Fashion became the first carbon-neutral luxury group. Isabella asked, how big is the impact? The watch marks 2.3 million tons of CO2 prevented each year. That takes work across 47 countries, suppliers, renewable energy, carbon offsets, and ethical production. Mom cried. Valentina, we're sorry. We thought fashion wasn't real work. My work is fine, I said. Celestial Fashion will be worth $8.1 billion soon. We're moving into lab-grown materials, zero-waste systems, and circular economy models. Marco whispered, 8.1 billion. From drawings? Not drawings, I corrected. From a global sustainable fashion empire. The sketches are only the start. I headed to the elevator. I need to review the Milan launch and Tokyo expansion. We also run offices in Paris, New York, London, Sao Paulo, and Mumbai. Our designs are sold in 89 countries, saving 4.7 million tons of textile waste. At the door I looked back. I wish I could have shared this with you. But every time I tried, you said fashion was frivolous. The elevator closed. My Tesla waited, phone buzzing with calls, proposals, and congratulations. I silenced it. My family would wait. I had a sustainable empire to run for 890 million consumers worldwide.